Hey, I'm Alex Lemke. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Connectors. We're a climate fintech based here in London. And we work together with banks globally to serve them with API products that empower them to offer their customers carbon footprint insights based on their financial data. And so we believe that the best way to actually measure your carbon footprint is from your financial data. Whatever you spend money on, whatever you invest in, it all affects your carbon footprint. And we actually build tools to convert that data into carbon footprint estimates. And so we have one flagship product called Connect Insights. It's a simple API which banks integrate into their retail banking proposition to offer their customers education, first and foremost, but also actual tools to measure and reduce their carbon footprint based on their financial data. But I'll speak about our new product today called Connect Reports, which actually is a carbon accounting solution that you can offer your customers as a service through your banking environments. And so obviously it's quite a unique proposition to an extent. So I'll leave you with 3 reasons why you should care about this and why this is something your financial institution should care about. Reason number 1, if you're a bank, you're regulated, and essentially you have to measure the carbon footprint of your portfolio. And your financed emissions can actually be between 80 to 100 times higher than your operational emissions. And this means that every time you loan money out, you become proportionally responsible for a part of that carbon footprint. It flows into your own Scope 3 carbon footprint supply chain emissions. And so if you don't measure that, then you're in trouble, because fundamentally, it makes up a huge part of your carbon footprint. The second reason I want to give you is that whilst large companies have this data available in at hand, fundamentally, it's the SMEs who currently are left behind. There's around 5.5 million SMEs in the UK, and maybe 24 million in Europe, which is quite a big number. But less than 1 to 2% currently are estimated to actually report their carbon footprint. And so how do you mitigate for that? How do you actually measure those emissions? And the answer is, right now, you just can't, really. I mean, unless they report their carbon footprint over time. And so the third reason I want to give you is that we solve that problem. We actually provide carbon accounting as a service to those SMEs directly in your banking environment. So let's look at the demo, because enough talking. So fundamentally, Connect Earth is a white label, and it's a simple iframe you can implement, and it's based on a simple API solution. And so Connect Report essentially is what you see here. And the first thing we have to do is educate customers on why. Why is this an issue? Why do we have to calculate this? And so we tend to relabel this platform a tiny bit by, for example, inserting your strategy, explaining why your bank in particular needs to get this data, and what the benefits are also financially. And so we start off, for example, here by explaining what is Scope 1, 2, and 3. What does it actually mean? We link to external sources here, but this can be linked to anything. It can be linked to your own educational video that we can help you with or that you may already have. And so what's important to note is that you have 3 scopes, of course. You have Scope 1, direct emissions of the business. You have Scope 2, indirect emissions of the business. And you have Scope 3, which are basically supply chain emissions or other indirect emissions. And so we can automate a huge chunk of Scope 3, which takes a lot of time to actually enter manually by simply analyzing transaction data. But for Scope 1, we have to collect data on the company. So for example, we kick off by having the company fill in information, in this case, Acme Corp in New York, in the US, in the business sector of retail trade. And that's important because fundamentally it's a difference in the data we use depending on where you're based and also what sector you're in. And the same with the starting and reporting date, because we use different emission factors based on the year, especially because of inflation, especially when you look at mapping the transaction data, it changes over time and you have to adjust for that. So going forward, we have to get some data manually, right? So we try to, as little as possible, get this, but we mostly look at Scope 1 and 2 and some categories of Scope 3. But fundamentally, you have electricity consumption, for example, which you can enter. In the US, you can choose if you're in the Rockies or if you're in Oahu, which would be quite nice. You have heat consumption as well, employee commuting, business travel, etc. Conscious of time here. When you look at purchased goods and services, this is the part we completely automate based on financial data. And so you may ask yourself, okay, we are Bank ABC, but our customer also uses Revolut Business, and it uses Pleo, and it uses Brex in the US. We only have like 1/3 of the transactions. Well, we can map into open banking. We can map to open banking categories and use open banking to get more data. But also, we actually can link into QuickBooks and Xero and other accounting platforms as well to get this data. The result is quite straightforward. Again, this is just a demo version, so we can make this look completely beautiful in your banking environment based on what you want. But fundamentally, it's about simplicity. What is your carbon footprint? Where's it come from? We can break it down by scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. We can break it down by different, the individual scopes 1, 2, and 3, and really make it easy also for you to empower the customer to benchmark themselves. So we actually have a huge data set on SMEs in this certain sector that they may operate in, which can help the SME benchmark themselves and understand where they can improve, but which also can help you as a bank understand, can this SME, for example, qualify for an ESG-linked loan? Where can we potentially help with the lending of solar panels, for example? This all links very simply into our API documentation. I'm not going to go through this API documentation now fully. Fundamentally, your developers can go to docs.connect.earth, where it's completely public and available. We have insights here, for example, into some example code. We have Python, Node.js, Java, Kotlin, Swift, etc. available. And we even have some examples of how we map to open banking categorizations. Your developers can also simply get access to the API console, get an API key. You have a quick start guide, copy the API key, and fundamentally, you're ready to go. To summarize, Connect Earth empowers you to take control of your financed emissions. We do so by making it as easy as possible for companies to measure their carbon footprint. We'd love to speak to you about this in more detail. Our booth is all the way at the back on the very right, so basically at the very end, unfortunately. So please do come by. I think Ollie, our sales guy, would be quite happy about that. And yeah, thank you for listening, and any questions, let us know.